Alright, so we saw some other things in mental ray and some pretty cool, neat things for doing different types of lighting, like outdoor lighting, stuff like that. Now we're going to look at how to combine global illumination and final gathering and bring them together to create a very awesome lighting setup that's very optimized and pretty quick to render. So let's see how we can use both of them together. Alright, let's open up an example scene here. And the scene that we want to open up is called 06. Scene GI plus Final Gather, or FG, short for Final Gather, start. So let's open that up. Okay, so if I go to shaded mode here by hitting 5 on the keyboard, you'll notice it's the same apartment scene we've been working on before. And if I go to my render settings, this actually happens to be the same scene that we did global illumination with. So if I go to my global illumination tab, let me collapse Final Gathering there, notice my accuracy is set to 4000. If I close that, and I select one of these lights, and I open up its attribute editor, and I go to the mental ray tab and I look at the photon section here of attributes and parameters, you notice I'm set to 2 million photons. So this is the same scene that we finished up when we did the global illumination chapter in this same apartment scene. Okay, what we're going to do this time around, we're going to combine global illumination with final gathering. If I go over here to final gathering, I'm going to use Final Gathering in combination with Global Illumination. Now you're probably thinking, whoa, wait a minute. When we used Global Illumination, it took a pretty long time to render. That was a pretty big, tough render that we did. It had 2 million photons per light. It was 6 million photons. In fact, it was such an intense render, we had to go and do the 3 GB switch for Windows 32-bit to get it to render, or else mental ray would crash. So adding Final Gathering has to make the problem even worse, right? Not quite. This is the way it works, in a very simple overview kind of way. Global illumination, when used by itself, works pretty decent, but not too great. Final Gathering, when used by itself, works pretty decent, but not too great. However, when you bring global illumination and Final Gathering together, you get a much better solution, because they end up complementing each other. They work together. They're kind of Final Gathering is kind of like the yin to global illumination's yang, if you want to think about it that way. Okay? So the way it works is like this. Basically, we're going to take global illumination and we're going to lower the amount of photons in our scene. We're going to lower them from the millions to the hundreds of thousands. And you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, if I do that, I'm going to have blotching all over my scene. The global illumination is not going to look right. You told me earlier to use millions of photons. Correct. You use millions of photons when you use global illumination by itself. When you combine it with Final Gathering, you're no longer bound to that rule. You can now use less global illumination photons. Instead of using 6 million, we can use as little as 600,000, which it isn't even a million, just about 500,000. And by using Final Gathering, we can get rid of that light blotching that you would expect when using such a small amount of photons in your scene with global illumination. So now that you got a little overview description of what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and actually do it. So let me turn Final Gathering off. I'm going to leave Global Illumination on. Close the render settings there. I'm going to go to these lights and I'm going to go ahead and start to reduce the global illumination photons from 200,000 to about 200,000. Okay, so I'll just copy that number and I'll just quickly go in here and start pasting it for these other lights. Okay, so there we go. Just double check there. Okay, so now each light has 200,000 photons, which comes out to grand total of 600,000 photons, which really isn't that many photons. I'll close this, go to my render settings. Let me go to quality. If you remember from the last time I worked on this apartment scene, I did increase my anti-aliasing settings to pretty high numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower that to when it gets to -2 and 0. I'm going to take my anti-aliasing contrast and reduce that, or increase it to 0.1. That way it speeds up rendering a bit more. Okay. Now if that's done, I'll close that and I'll do an IPR here. Render that out. Should render out fairly quickly. We're not doing too many photons like we were doing before, 6 million. Okay, so here we are with only 600,000. And we have another problem here. If you notice, the global illumination actually looks very good for 600,000 photons. Let me close that. That's because my memory bugged out. If I go to the Indirect Illumination tab here, and I collapse Final Gathering, keeps opening on me. I'll go to Photon Map, and voila, there's the mystery problem. I have Rebuild Photon Map turned off. Now before I turn it on, let me go back to my file browser here, and here's my apartment.ph map. You can see it here in the Photon Map parameters here for the Photon Map file. That's the Photon Map I created with 6 million photons. If we look at that map, it's 120 megabytes big. That's a pretty big Photon Map. Okay. Now what we're going to do is turn on Rebuild. And let's just do a regular render. I won't even do an IPR. Okay. And we can see there's the photon emission down there. It's actually going by pretty fast. Just a few seconds to render that out. Pretty good. There we go. There's our render. Nice. Okay. So again, the beauty of using only 600,000 photons, renders out a lot faster. Now you can see there's barely any light blotching, if at all. This actually looks pretty good. But just for the sake of showing you how this works, I'm going to take the radius here, and I'm going to reduce the radius to about, let's say 4. And let's just do a render region of this area here, so we can see the difference just in that spot. There's the photon emission, going by pretty quick. Being able to render fast is always a good thing. So we can see a little tiny bit of light blotching. Not too much, but it still looks pretty good for 600,000 photons. We're going to make this look even better by using Final Gathering. Okay, so our photon map is created. If we go back to the file browser here, we'll see the photon map is now only 12 megabytes, which is pretty good. Okay, so let me go ahead and close that. And our accuracy rating is actually pretty high. Let me reduce that to about 1000. Let me do another render. I'm purposely trying to get the photon map. I'm purposely trying to get the photon map to look blotchy and pretty nasty. Make it look kind of low quality, mediocre quality. I'm doing it on purpose. That way you can see the difference with the Final Gathering. Okay, we introduced a little more light blotching right there, thanks to reducing the accuracy there to only 1000. Okay, perfect. Let me close that. What I'm going to do is just rotate my camera here, and maybe I'll render out from another view. Really doesn't matter what view I render out from. What I'm going to do now is go to Final Gathering. I'm going to turn Final Gathering on. Now, normally I would have to use a large amount of Final Gather accuracy rays. If I was using Final Gathering by itself for this specific scene, I would use about 500 rays, which is pretty slow to render. If I turn off global illumination and I render with 500 rays, do a regular render here. Okay, look at the lower left down here, progress bar. There's the Final Gathering. It's taking a pretty good amount of time, as you can see. We can already see it's pretty slow. 500 rays is a lot. And we can tell just by the way this thing is rendering that this thing's going to take a good amount of time to render here. We're looking at a good maybe 5 minutes just to render out this Final Gathering. Or no, probably less. Probably about 3 minutes. Couple of minutes, something like that. With 500 rays. Okay, so I'll hit escape to cancel that render out. And if I go to accuracy, I can lower this down to something like 100. Sorry, not 1000, 100. Gotta be careful with those extra zeros. And I'll render this out again. And now you notice that it's going a lot faster. It's rendering out huge chunks of this image. Just large portions of this image are being rendered out very fast. Because we're only doing 100 rays as opposed to 500. Okay? You also notice that the lighting, although we do have indirect illumination from the Final Gathering, it doesn't look that great. It doesn't look bright enough. Now we could increase the secondary diffuse bounces and render again. And that'll improve the quality a little bit. It'll make it look a little bit brighter, not too much. But it'll also slow down Final Gathering considerably. So what I'm going to do is hit escape to stop that render. Cancel it out. I don't want to do any extra diffuse bounces. What I'm going to do is turn on global illumination. And now, basically, the way this is going to work is that the global illumination is going to work as that extra secondary diffuse bounce. Alright, so the global illumination is going to bring in the nice lighting in our scene to make the scene look nice and bright. The final gathering is going to go in, take that global illumination with 600,000 photons, which is not a lot, and only an accuracy of 1,000, and it's going to clean up that global illumination map. It's going to interpolate it, it's going to smooth it out, it's going to make it look nice. Okay, so now with global illumination turned on, what I'm going to do is turn rebuild off. Now, why am I turning rebuild off? Because I already built this map a while ago. The apartment map, if I look here at my file browser, has already been built. It's 12 megabytes. Okay, so I don't need to rebuild it again. This would allow me to render out even faster. Now, let me collapse the photon map parameter there, and let me go down to I'm going to go down to Final Gathering Map. I'm going to open up those attributes there. And now you notice that the pre-compute photon lookup option is now active. I can actually turn it on now. What that's going to do, it's going to look at the photon map, in this case, the apartment photon map, and it's going to calculate Final Gathering a little bit faster. Final Gathering is going to get a bit of a render boost here because it's going to pre-compute that photon map that we already created, and it's going to use it to be able to calculate Final Gathering even faster. Okay? That's why I turned the photon map to rebuild. I turned it off. Because if it's on, when it rebuilds the map, it's going to take longer to rebuild that photon map because it has to do the fast lookup, which it's doing here with the pre-compute photon lookup option turned on. So by turning the rebuild off, we don't have to do that. So let me just collapse that. And with the pre-compute photon lookup option on, and using only an accuracy of 100, I can go ahead and render this out and take advantage of the global illumination to help out the Final Gathering here. And Final Gathering is going to use the global illumination photon map that I created earlier to go ahead and pre-compute some of those photon and radiance values and render out a little bit faster with the Final Gathering. So there it goes. It's rendering out. It's not taking too long. I'll just skip ahead so you don't have to watch this. Alright, so it took barely over a minute, about a minute and 9 seconds to render this out. And you can see we get ourselves a pretty nice, clean result. The only thing we'd have to do is increase the anti-aliasing. But you can see that the global illumination, despite the fact we're using only an accuracy of 1000, we're using a radius of 4, which is going to introduce light blotching with the photon map. And we switched our photons from 6 million to only 600,000, less than 1 million. Which normally, as you saw in the previous videos when we were working on this apartment scene with global illumination only, we would get very blotchy results. The only way we got away from blotchy results was by using a radius of 0, an accuracy of 4,000, 4 times the accuracy we're using now, and of course 6 million photons. More than 6 times the amount of photons that we're using now. And yet we're able to get this great result, nice and smooth, artifact free, with a good global illumination photon map with the help of Final Gathering. And we were able to do it in only about a minute. So this is a great way of working. Final Gathering and global illumination were actually meant to work together. You could use them by themselves, and lots of times they are used by themselves. But in all honesty, when Mental Images created these two algorithms, they created them in a way where they could complement each other, where they could work together to help each other render out a little bit faster, and to help each other fix things like artifacting and light blotching, stuff like that. So I strongly encourage you and recommend that you use these two indirect lighting algorithms together in unison. So pair them up, use them together, and have them take advantage of each other's strengths and help out each other's weaknesses in the process to create yourself some very nice renders. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video. I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we're going to start looking at caustics, another one of the neat indirect illumination algorithms of Mental Ray.